Hey everybody, hanging here with my buddy here, D Cox, right? COX?
That's right.
All the way from, where are you from again?
Wichita, Kansas.
Wichita, Kansas. And what are you going on about? 65, 68? How old did you say you were?
71.
71. Well, JD's been hanging out here at Hobbichagacha, and we've just been having one hell of a time storytelling. I mean, you got so many stories that are so entertaining. What the heck? I mean, everyone. Did you ever make a documentary or something? Or
No, never.
I mean, you could start with what was that first one you started with, the outlaw? What's his name again?
Henry Starr.
Henry Starr. Can you give us just a? I mean, you don't have to go through the whole thing, but your dad and how you grew up and what you know about that guy.
Henry Starr was just he was a bank robber that lived in the northeastern corner of Oklahoma and at the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century. And my father was a kid growing up down there, and Henry was kind of a next door neighbor type thing. And
But he was an outlaw.
oh yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
Henry robbed 21 banks, 30 banks, something, 14 banks. I'm not sure of the number, but more banks than Jesse James and all the other big time banks.
And he was what kind of the turn of the century back then. So and then what is the connection with him and your dad?
Oh,
didn't he kind of take your dad under his wing? Or?
Well, my father lived in a hotel next door to Henry Starr's mother, and Henry would come and stay at the hotel so he could spend time with his mother. He never married, kind of a mother's boy, and
Yeah.
what have you. And so he just, my dad just trail around with him once in a while.
But he was older than your dad.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he was a grown man. Your dad was
he was a grown man. And he was probably old enough to have been my father, my grandfather, but he was about 20 years older than my dad.
Your dad, yeah. So he'd take your dad out and buy him ice creams and all that crap.
Yeah.
And then, so he this Henry Starr guy, I mean, when you talk outlaw and people are thinking, and you mentioned Jesse James and the Youngers and all that crap, was he like a cold-blooded killer type guy?
No, he was a nice guy. Or he wasn't a nice guy. Nice guys probably don't rob 20 banks.
Oh, that's his 20 banks. He robbed 20 banks?
Well, 20 or 19,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm not sure of the number.
Yeah.
All I know is they say it was more than the Jameses and the Daltons and all of them put together out there through the early part of the 20th century.
But he wasn't like the cold-blooded killer type.
No.
He had to kill a couple people died during this?
Somebody died in a bank out in Colorado that he robbed. He had a partner go off and shoot somebody in a bank, and he shot a federal marshal out of Judge Parker's court in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
That can't be good.
No, it wasn't. But it happened when he was about 17 or 18 years old.
And how did he end up dying, passing, Henry?
How did he die?
Did he end up going to prison finally and all that, or did he ever get caught? Or
He did prison time once when he was fairly young and was never sort of caught again.
So he
Killed
died.
in a bank robbery.
He got killed in a bank robbery?
Yeah, he got killed in a bank robbery.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, live by the sword, die by the sword kind of thing.
Yep, very much.
Anyway, I don't know what we were talking about, the Ford company or the Ford Motor Company.
Oh,
With your
okay.
father, I think.
Yeah. In 1955, my dad got into a little disagreement with the Ford Motor Company. Times were tough in western Kansas, the dust was blowing, and the rain wouldn't fall, and the wheat wouldn't grow, and nobody had any money. And
What year was this?
1954, 55. They were lean years there. And my dad had Ford automobile dealership in Cimarron, Kansas. And he wanted to sell it and get out and go do something else where he might be able to make a living. And so he found a buyer, and from out of Lahana, Colorado, or Lamar, Colorado rather. and who's a friend of his from somewhere in his past. And the guy had a lot of money, and he wanted to be a Ford dealer for whatever reason. I have no idea, other than probably he was either crazy or stupid. And so my dad and he made a deal, and Dad notified Ford Motor Company he had found a buyer and was going to move on. And Ford Motor Company said, no, we're not going to accept him as a Ford dealer. He is not the class of people we wish to have in our organization. And you need
This
to
is the guy your dad wanted to sell the Ford dealership to.
Right.
And Ford didn't like this guy.
Right,
He was
right,
inside.
exactly. They seemed to feel that he was not their kind of people. So they told Dad to find another buyer. And Dad spent the next month, year, looking for a buyer. And there just wasn't anybody in that area of the country that had any money in his pocket who was interested in buying a Ford dealership. But there was a local Plymouth dealer who wanted to buy it very badly, and even contacted Ford and told them that he'd like to buy it. And he had absolutely no money. His his Plymouth dealership consisted of a one-car garage behind his house in the worst area of Cimarron. And so Dad told him, he said, you know, okay, if you want me to sell to him, you finance it. And give me my money and I'll walk away. And they said, oh no, we don't finance dealers. You need to finance. And Dad said, that won't work. You'll never pay me a dime. I'll lose every dime I got in this damn thing. And so they argued and fought for a little while, and quite a little while actually. And finally, Dad told him, he said, well, okay, I guess you give me no choice. I'm going to have to sell to him. I'll tell you what to do. If you'll floor plan me 65 new automobiles, and floor planning means to give me a clear title to the vehicle so I can take it to any bank and sell it to get my money, and then I give you my word that I'll pay you. And they said, that's fine. He said, I want the first 3 days of sales on the new cars, because I got a lot of new car buyers lined up for new cars, and I'll have a good first week in there, and then I can move on. I have a little money in my pocket. And they said, okay, we can do that. And so the arrangements were made, and the cars were sent to Cimarron, Kansas. And the night before the new cars would come out, or the day before the new cars would come out, my dad found about every able-bodied man in Cimarron, Kansas, and put him in a new Ford, and had him drive to Kansas City, where the auto auction was. And the next morning, when the new cars came out, and the auto auction opened up, the auto auction had 65 new Fords for sale. And they pretty much sold all of them with whatever amount of money they bring. And since it was
What did a Ford bring in those days?
$22,
$2,500.
$2,500. Between $2,000 and $2,500.
And your dad sold 60.
Not much money. Huh?
56 of them? How many?
65 of them.
65,
I remember right around that number.
Cash money.
Cash money. 2 grocery sacks full of it.
2 grocery sacks.
Yeah. And everything in the denomination you can imagine, from 1 to 100. Dad came home that night, got home. Kansas City was a long way away, and he probably left Kansas City about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Drove all the way to western Kansas, back to Cimarron, got in about midnight. And my mother, my brother, and myself were all asleep. And Dad came in the house and woke us all up and drug us into the dining room. And 2 stacks of money were sitting on the table in the dining room. And Dad told my brother and myself and my mother, he said, we're going to have to move. And he said, well, what I need you to do is I need you to get all your clothes back so you can move, and call first thing in the morning. Betsy, my mother, was to call a man who had a moving company from Kinsley, Kansas, and have him bring his truck out. And he also had a warehouse where he stored stuff for people, and take everything in the house and take it to his warehouse in Kinsley and store it for a while so we could find a new home. And then he reached in the sack and he got a handful of money, just reached in like that, and didn't count it or anything, just put it on the table and said, here, Betsy, this ought to get you by for a couple, 3 days. He said, I need you to meet me in Mineral Wells, Texas.
With the boys, you and your brother.
Huh?
You and your brother.
And my brother and I, the three of us, to meet him in Mineral Wells, Texas. And I think it was 2 days. And at the, what was the name of the hotel there? Anyway, it was the hotel where they had the Mineral Wells, and
Like hot tub.
name was after.
Hot tub?
They were hot tub, kind of a mud bath.
Yeah.
And the place was famous for them at that time. I don't know if it's still exists or not. But anyway, so Mom called everybody and got everything ready, and we drove to Mineral Wells and got a room at the hotel and went in and waited. And in a little while, I think maybe we were there close to a day before my father showed up. And he pulled in and he said, okay, we're going to go to Mexico tomorrow.
Mexico.
He left my mother a brand new car to drive to bring to take us to Mineral Wells in a brand new 1956 Ford convertible, black and red, with beautiful car. At least I thought it was. Mom didn't like it much because her hair blew in the wind and she thought that was bad. But that was another story. So anyway, we get in the car, and the next morning we take off, and by maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're crossing into Mexico at Laredo. And
how old are you at this point? 15, you said?
No. I'm 13. I might not even been 13. I think maybe I was still 12.
Just a teenager.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can get it figured out. That was those cars came out. New cars came out in about August of just before school started, in about August of 1955, and I was born in January 43. So I'm 12 and a half years old.
Right. Never been to Mexico before.
No, I've hardly been out of the state of Kansas. And but
your dad's got a couple sacks of cash.
Mexico sounded like a good place. I've seen the Pancho Villa movies and stuff. I know what it was all about.
And Dad's got a couple bags of cash.
And Dad's got.
He didn't really explain everything to you, but you know something's going on.
Well, yeah, we know something's going on. We ain't too sure what, and we're not totally certain we're real crazy about it. But whatever, Dad's always right, so we're gonna go. And he didn't have the 2 bags of money. He'd taken them down to my mother's mother-in-law in Wichita, Kansas, and he had given her the money to put in the bank and hold for him, or most of the money to put in the bank and hold for him. And he also signed over all the property he owned anywhere in the world, in Cimarron and Kinsley and what have you, and farm property out at Lewis, and a little bit of stuff down at Greensburg, and so that nobody could sue for it and take it from him, because it no longer belonged to him. It was gone. And so we
obviously he thought Ford and the federal government and everyone else is going to come after him because he just sold 56 cars.
Not only thought they were going to, they were going to.
They were coming.
Yeah, it was a pretty well guaranteed deal. Ford Motor Company wanted their money for their 65 cars, and the IRS wanted their money for the profit that he made from selling them. And so
how much? Well, let's see, 56 times 25. I mean, it was
65.
A couple $100,000.
65 times $2.
Yeah.
$1,500 is what? $175.
Yeah, a couple hundred.
But it's a pretty nice piece of money at that time.
1950.
Yeah. Well, just think about going out and buying 65 new cars today. What?
And then running to Mexico of all places. Here we are, right?
You got to go somewhere.
Well, not that we've done
Canada's not good. They'll send you back.
Yeah.
But Mexico has no.
Yeah. So Dad, as you like to call him,
and my father
had friends on the way with Ford dealerships in Monterey or something.
Right.
Huh?
He knew a guy from Monterey who was a Ford dealer that he'd met at some dealers meetings or something through the years while he was doing that. And Dad had lived in Mexico before. He lived in Tampico during the oil boom, so he was somewhat familiar with Mexico, although his Spanish was a little less than really bad, or a little more than really bad. And he kept running around trying to get people to sing songs that didn't exist. The mariachis. He kept trying to, everywhere we'd get to a mariachi, Dad would stand up and start singing his songs to him, wanting him to sing it. And he'd look at him like he was completely crazy. And then when we got home a year later, we found it wasn't a Mexican song at all. That it was something from an American movie. But there again, there were a couple other stories.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we get to Monterey, and Dad calls the Ford Motor Company and says, listen, I think you're probably aware that we've...
you get to Monterey and he goes to Ford Motor Company in America.
Right,
Okay.
right. He calls Detroit, and he says, listen, he says that you're probably aware there's been a little change in our regional plans and agreement, but I'd like to work something out with you and pay you for your car, and you pay me for my Ford dealership. And, oh no, we don't do that. We want our money, and we want it now. You get back here up here in the United States with our cash right now, or we're going to do something bad for you. And he said, well, I'm not sure what bad you can do for me. And he said, you know, when you decide to be a little more reasonable in your dealing, he said, I'll be glad to talk to you, and hung up the phone. Called the IRS and told them pretty much the same thing. They're kind of on hold here, but I'll get you your money just as soon as I can. And they said pretty much the same thing. Come back up here and go to Leavenworth for a few years. And,
Leavenworth prison.
Leavenworth prison, yeah. Where they put federal calendars and other people like that. So anyway, we sat around Monterey in a place called the Anfa Motel.
That what hotel?
Anfa Motel, A-N-F-A.
Oh,
yeah. I will never forget the name of it because it was the first place I ever got laid.
Viva Mexico, huh? Viva Mexico. You should be able to see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, that's freaking classic. If it's all right with you, I'd like to start back with the cop. What's his name that hit you in
Bill
the head? Or
Hicks.
you
Bill
had an
Hicks.
idea about hitting him?
Okay,
in
well, let me kind of start at the first story because it's a little, maybe a little, but when I got out of high school in Hutchinson, I started, and even before I got out of high school, I started kind of running around the bars, drinking some beer and stuff. And I was just a little young for what I was doing, and none of the guys I went to high school with were doing this yet. So I was kind of by myself running through these bars in Hutchinson. Hutchinson had quite a bunch of bars and prostitution and stuff because we had an air base outside town at that time.
Did you say prostitutes?
Huh? Oh yeah, there's a lot of prostitution in downtown Hutchinson. Oh, there's even prostitution going on today in Hutchinson. Much more than in Wichita, which is 10 times as high. But anyway, these two guys, one of them was named Arnie Rupke and the other one was named Glenn Fonda, had out of the kindness of their hearts or the blackness of their hearts, whichever, decided to adopt me and see that no harm came to me, kind of. And they would use me to do things like start fights by taking me by the seat of my pants and throwing me into a bar somewhere. As soon as somebody said something or raised a fist toward me, the two of them would just jump up and just beat the fuck out of everybody. While I crawled out of the
Sounds like Jay Craig.
Crawled out of the mess and went outside and waited in the car. And but whatever. And they were kind of my heroes. And they both had been in fights with police officers and beat up cops and stuff like that. And I thought that was really cool to be so tough you could actually beat up a police officer. So one night I was in the Manhattan Club there in the south end of Hutchinson, and the fight broke out. It was a pretty good one. And the two policemen that worked the bars in the south end of Hutchinson were named Bill Hicks and Bill Welch. And Bill Welch was about 300 and maybe 25 pounds, and Hicks was about 250. They were pretty good sized old boys, and they both really liked to fight. And so the thing was more fun to them than it really was being policemen. But they came running in the back door of the bar. I was standing right next to the back door, and this fight broke out, and the two of them come running in the back door to break it up. And I thought, well, since Arnie and Glenn have both whipped the cop, this is my big chance. And I pulled back and threw everything I had behind this punch and hit Hicks in the side of his head, probably brushed him like a fly, because he didn't even look at me, he just ran right on by. and I thought I'd really gotten away with something, and marched right outside and walked on away. And so a week later on Friday night or Saturday, it was on Friday night, I'm pretty sure, I'm sitting in the same bar at the Manhattan Club at 6 o'clock in the evening and just ordered my first beer and about half through it, a little 15-cent short draw probably. And Bill Hicks walked up to me and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "JD, you're drunk, you're going to have to come to jail with me." And I said, "Bill, I've had half of one beer." I was like, "I can't be drunk." I said, "Don't be silly. Leave me alone." And he said, "JD," he said, "I'm not going to take this." He said, "You're drunk. Get up and go get my police car, and I'm going to take you to jail and book you for drunk." And I said, "Oh, God, Bill." So I get up and I go out and I sit in the police car. No handcuffs, no bullshit. Got in the front seat, didn't even get in the back seat. He drove around the corner, half block from the city jail. He drove around the corner and pulled in front of the city jail and marched me inside. And I thought he was going to take me up to the booking desk and have the booking sergeant write an arrest deal out and put me in the drunk tank and probably hold me all night and then have my mother and father come get me in the morning. Instead he just walked up and took his gun belt off and handed it over to the officer behind the desk sergeant or whatever he was, and said, "I'm going to talk to JD for a few minutes. We're going to use this room back here." And I still wasn't thinking much about it. I thought he was probably going to take me back there and say, "Hey, JD, that wasn't very cool the other day, what you did." But he took me to the back room and just slapped the fuck out of me. Just as soon as we walked in the room, he just reached around and grabbed me by the front of my shirt and pulled me around, went bam, 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 about 4 fucking times. And he said, he said, "You know, I can really fucking hurt you if I want to. But he said, I like you and I'm not going to." He said, let that be a lesson to you. Don't ever hit a police officer again." And I took him for his word, and I never ever raised my hand to a police officer from that day to this. It was a good lesson in life.
Tim might learn that lesson.
He may need to at one point or another, if he keeps messing around with these police officers out here, he may even get the lesson without even getting hit one. Anyway, back to my original story. Arnie and I'd gone to Western Texas to work for a company called Gemco, grain equipment manufacturing company on grain elevator, just north of Amarillo, Texas, in a little town called Border. Or no, I was in Dumas, a little town called Dumas, Texas. And Arnie and Glenn, a friend of ours by the name of Pudge Kelly, had moved down to Fort Worth to try to get away from them because of all the bullshit they were always stirring up and trying to kind of straighten his life out a little bit maybe or something. And of course, as soon as he got settled and got a job, half of ever useless motherfucker in Hutchinson, Kansas moved to Fort Worth and moved right into his little one-bedroom apartment with him. And so there were probably anywhere from 9 to 12, 14 people sleeping in a pile in this place. And they called my mother or something and got a phone number for me out at Dumas, and called and said, "Hey, JD, you got to come to Fort Worth to party. It ain't far from Dumas to Fort Worth. Shit, it's farther from Fort Worth to Dumas than it is from Dumas to Wichita. I mean, to Hutchinson, where I come from." But anyway, it sounded like a good idea, and so I went and asked the man I worked for if I could have a couple of days off. And he said, "If it's really important, I think we can get you a couple of days off." And I took off for Dallas, Texas, or Fort Worth, and I got to Fort Worth and hung around for a day or so and what have you. And we had a big party the first night I got there, and it just got completely out of control and this and that, and we had a really good time. And the next day we got up about noon, and we were all hungover and what have you, and nothing going on, and everybody wandering around in a circle like they do. And little Bill Kite said,
what's his name?
Glenn
What's his name? Little Bill what?
Little Bill Kite, K-I-E-S-T, German last name. And he's about 5'5", and he's about that wide, and kind of a really pretty good build, and very fond of fighting. But he didn't often fight by himself. He had another friend by the name of Donnie Harold, who was almost his twin. They looked just alike. And the two of them would gang up on some big guy and just beat the dog fuck out of him. Bill also picked up a bad habit. He carried a pocket knife with a blade about that long, the small blade, and he'd take that out and open it and keep it hidden in his hand, and then he'd stab a guy about 8 times with it. Well, it wouldn't go deep enough to kill anybody or really hurt him real bad, but it made them scream like they were being fucked. But anyway, Little Bill said that Glenn and I, Glenn had his new Thunderbird down there, or his 55 Thunderbird down there, said, hey guys, let's go and ride around Dallas a minute. None of us really
Dallas.
Dallas. Yeah.
The Big D.
Yeah, just east of Fort Worth. 20 miles or 20 minutes or something like that. So the three of us went out and jumped in the T-Bird and flew over to Dallas. And we're driving around downtown Dallas and looking up the big buildings, and we're pretty fucking impressed. There ain't no lying about it. And Little Bill sees Neiman Marcus department store. And he's, guys, look, there's Neiman Marcus. It's the most famous department store in the world. Stop the car, we got to go in. Glenn pulls over the curb. We got nothing else to do anyway. Glenn pulls over the curb. We park. We walk back half block to Neiman Marcus and walk up. And the front door in Neiman Marcus was pretty impressive. Revolving doors made out of brass, or at least brass plated with all the glass. And there were about 2 or 3 of them, and then doors in between and stuff, and all this glass in front and stuff. The big Neiman Marcus signs with the windows beautifully decorated with women in expensive, or mannequins in expensive shit. And we, so we wander in and looking like 3 of the worst country hicks that ever walked out of the pits, I'm sure. And, all in jeans and t-shirts and cigarette packs rolled up on our sleeves. And you step right in the front door of Neiman Marcus, and it's marble, but starting right at the edge of those glass doors, there's a big piece of carpet runs down, and then it takes off to the right, and it's the jewelry department. And this motherfucker who's got jewelry in it, he just hardly can believe. And lots and lots and lots of it. And they got a great big cash register set right on the counter, right next to the fucking front door.
People don't use checks back in those days, right?
No, they're not using checks, and people are buying jewelry and giving these people working behind the counter money, and they're just popping the door and stuffing money in there like crazy, and we're just all country boys goggling, going, oh my God. And so we never got any farther in the store than that little area, and we all 3 walked back outside, and just a goggle, head spinning, and we walk over to the car, and 3 of us get in and sit down, and I said, did you guys see that? And they said, yeah. I said, there was a cash register right there against the front door that maybe had $1 million in it or something. I don't know how much money it had, but it had all it could hold. And this is on Friday. Tomorrow's Saturday, and there's going to be a lot of people down here spending money. That ain't shit. And so, the more we talked, the more we thought, well, it would be a good idea if Neiman Marcus was to share with us.
Was to share with you.
Yeah. We wasn't going to take it all. We were just going to take one cash register. They could have the rest. And so, we get up Saturday morning. We, of course, get real drunk again. And so we get up about noon and what have you. We fuck around a little bit here and there and what have you, and get a couple beers in us to get in the right mood for the great Neiman Marcus robbery. And we go out to get in the car, and Glenn tells Little Bill, he said, Bill, you drive. And I started getting in the middle, and he said, JD, you're not going to go. And I said, Glenn, I said, it was my idea. And he said, JD, I don't care if it was your idea. He said, the idea's great. He said, you're going to get a third of the money, don't worry about it. He said, there's no place for 2 of us, and for 3 of us in that car. He said, I'm going to have to get out of that car, go get that big fucking cash register, carry it out to the curb and jump in the car with it, and Bill's going to drive off real fast. And he said, I can't be throwing that fucking cash register down on top of you or climbing in on top of you or something. Just be in the way. So just stay here, and we'll bring you your money in a little while. And so it didn't seem like a good idea, but I couldn't do anything about it. They weren't going to take me. And my feelings were really hurt and shit. But anyway, so they take off, and they go. And they go to Neiman Marcus, and the plan works out beautiful. Little Bill pulls right in, right square outside that front door that's next to the jewelry counter. And Glenn gets up, walks in through the rotating glass door, and just walks over, grabs the register up, turned around, and marched right back out of the store with the register in his hands. Nobody said a word, no nothing. He jumped in the fucking car. They drove off. Little Bill went down a block or two, took a right or a left or whatever, and then turned into the first alley he could find. In the meantime, Glenn's over there and manages to get the register open and dumps all the money into the floorboards of the car. And they pull up next to a trash container, some kind of big dumpster type thing or something, and he throws the cash register in it. And Little Bill throws the car back in gear, and they take off and out of the alley and around, and about the time they get back to Main Street, sirens are starting running, but they're not too concerned about it because they don't think anybody's gotten much of a look at them, and nobody really had. They had gotten away with the fucking thing. They were home free, but there was a fucking radio program on, and the guy was advertising the brand new Neiman Marcus store in Garland, Texas, which is just in North Dallas, and maybe like 15 or 20 miles from where they're at. And it's their grand opening, and everything's wonderful and what have you. And Bill and Glenn are going, do you suppose they built the store on the same plan? And one says, you know, they did. And so they thought, well, 2 cash registers are better than 1. So they take off for Garland, Texas. It takes them a little while to get there because they'd never been to Garland and they'd never been to North Dallas. And they hardly knew which direction Fort Worth was, which is where they should have gone. And they go up to Garland, to the great big new shopping center there where the Neiman Marcus store is, and bigger than shit. The goddamn thing's just like the one. They pull over and Glenn goes up and walks around past the front door, peeking in to see if it looked like the same deal. And he said it was exactly the same fucking setup. So he goes back and gets in the car. Little Bill pulls around the block to get the right angle and the right run at it, pulls up next to the curb. Glenn walks in, grabs the cash register, and there was a man in a suit sitting next to the rotating door that Glenn was going to come out of, right next to the cash register. And Glenn didn't notice the man had a 2x4 block in his hand. And when Glenn started to walk back out that door, that man just dropped that 2x4 block into that rotating door, and it went click and locked Glenn right in the middle of a fucking glass box. And the guy was a Dallas detective, and he had the same thought they had. It was too easy. We got to go get another one. And he just outguessed them. And so Glenn's locked in a glass box in the front of Neiman Marcus department store with a cash register in his hand, and, which makes it fairly difficult to claim your innocence. And Little Bill, seeing what happened, did the only thing sensibly, floors the fucking car, puts the gas on the floor, and takes off. Gets down half, 3/4 of a block or whatever, doesn't take the car out of gear, doesn't do anything, just stands up and steps out of the car and lets it go, and takes off walking off into the crowd of the shopping center and walks away. And they chased him all over the north end of Dallas till about 11 or 12 o'clock that night before they got him run to ground and found him. In the meantime, we're over in Fort Worth listening on the radio to him chasing. And Arnie and I get all brave and get in my car, and we go over and drive around North Dallas with the police looking for Bill, but they found him first. And the gist of the story is that Little Bill got 2 years in Huntsville prison, and Glenn got 3. And Glenn spent the first few months of his time in Huntsville behind the walls, and then he had some trouble with some Mexicans, which Glenn seemed to always have trouble with Mexicans, and he hurt some of them, and he had a big scar on his face for the rest of his life from where one of them had hit him with a hammer right here, about here, and but they had to take him out and put him in Sugar Land, which is the farm where they make them work and stuff like that. And so he spent 3 years working hoeing fields on a Sugarland farm. And one day, he showed back up. I was sitting in the Manhattan Club, drinking a beer, as usual. And 2 hands landed on my shoulder, and a face come around beside me, and I didn't even have to look up. I knew who it was. I said, "Hey, Glenn." He said, "Hey, JD." I said, "I'm sorry about that all going down the way it did." And he said, "Well, it wasn't your fault. You weren't the one that decided it was 2 stores better than one." I said, "I know that." He said, "Excuse me just a minute." He said, "There's a guy there I need to talk to a minute." And he'd been gone for 3 years. He hadn't been home for 3 years. And he walked over, and there was a guy standing there in the Manhattan Club in a pair of bib overalls, like farmers used to wear. And Glenn walks up to the guy and immediately gets right in his face and starts yelling and screaming at him. And the guy's trying to kind of look away and trying to, avoid trouble. And Glenn keeps telling him, "Just look in my eyes, motherfucker. Don't you look away from me, you son of a bitch." And I looked down, and Glenn had unzipped his pants and took his dick out, and he was pissing on this guy.
Who was it?
Huh? Who was the guy? Never knew. Just somebody.
Why'd he do that?
Yeah, because that was Glenn. I doubt it was somebody who made him mad 3 years before, because he hadn't been around for 3 years.
It had nothing to do with the Neiman Marcus or anything.
It had nothing to do with
you
anything.
You hadn't seen him in 3 years.
He gets out of jail. He gets out of prison.
Excuse me, I got to do something, and starts peeing on this guy.
Yeah, yeah. And if that wasn't bad enough, he was on a real tear. And so we sat around the bar. I bought the beer because Glenn was a little broke, having been in prison, making 5 cents an hour for 3 years. And by 10 o'clock in the evening, we were lit up pretty good. And the band took a break, and somebody turned on the jukebox, and Glenn got up, danced over to the jukebox, pulled his dick out, and pissed down the corn plot of it.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't have any idea again. I didn't ever ask Glenn why he did things. And the jukebox sorted out and caught fire. And so they had to empty this bar containing several hundred people. It was a big crowd by then. And call the fire department and what have you. And one thing led to another. And just another night in Wichita, Kansas. Pretty
Another night in Wichita, Kansas.
And that's just began pretty much. That was kind of about the general run thing.
Wow.
But anyway, that's the great Neiman Marcus robbery story.
Yeah, how old were you then?
Huh?
What'd you say?
I was 19 the day.
Oh, you were only 19.
The day they did the robbery, I was 19.
God, it's going to be hours and hours before we get to the Stinky Pants strip clubs.
Oh.
Can we tell us a little bit? Let's jump 20 years to what was it called? Stinky Pants or Fancy Pants?
I had a small construction company in Wichita, Kansas, and I did remodeling work, and I built some houses, and I just did anything that you could do pounding nails to make a living. And I usually had a few employees or whatever. And I had met one of, actually he was not a brother, he was a brother-in-law, but there was a family in Wichita that ran the new dancing and prostitution. And they were the Trotter brothers. There were 4 brothers and 2 brother-in-laws and a sister. There were several sisters, but one sister was also pretty much an entrepreneur, and she got herself in the business pretty well too. And amongst the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them or whatever, they had all the new dancing bars and most of the massage parlors and all that kind of business pretty well tied up. And I was friends with Kenneth Hadley, the brother-in-law, and he was kind of the brains behind the whole thing. He was one that always came up. He was the idea man. He wasn't the brain, but he was the idea man. It was always Kenneth who came up with the next idea of how to make things better and bigger and make more money or do something a little different or what have you to bring in income. And Kenneth started hiring me to work on his building and his clubs, and I started getting a little better at it and I learned how to build a decent workable bars where bartenders could throw out drinks in a hurry. I learned how to build a stage for dancing girls. I learned how to build a light show and different things like that. And so after a few years of this, they would call me and they said, instead of paying you, I'm short of money, instead of paying you, let me give you an interest in the building, in the business, and you go do this. Go get the building ready, put a bar in it, and we'll give you 25 or 35% or whatever we managed to work out on a price. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up in partnership with Jerome's brother, one of the brothers, whom he and I kind of got to be pretty good friends, and we opened a place called the Sexy Leg first, and there were 3 of us in it, and we were third. Good morning, Tim. Good morning. And then we one thing. Oh, it was called, the Sexy Leg was close to the school. That's what it was. So shortly after we opened it, Gordon Lee, the head of the Vice Squad there in Hutchinson, or Wichita, come by and said, "Hey guys, I hate to point this out, but that's a school over there, and you can't have people dancing naked within a half a block of the school. And so close your fucking doors and go do something else." And so we said, "Yes, sir," and closed the doors. And we went and found another building, and we went in there and we opened a place and we called it Fancy Fannies.
Fancy Panties?
Fancy Fannies, yeah, they really weren't that fancy, but they tried. And then we opened another one called Fancy Fannies too. And we played around with them for a few years. I'll tell you a story. I don't know whether I ever told you this story, Tim. We had, in Fancy Fannies, we were using just half the building. We leased the building, but it was pretty good size, and so it had been cut in half and been there'd been 2 bars in it at one time, and so the side we weren't using was pretty much set up rigged out like a bar anyway, and the side we were using, we built stage and dance floor and whatever, stage and everything in it, and we're dancing naked. And Jerome and I got the idea that we wanted to do something with the other side to make money, because we were having to pay rent for it, and it was kind of expensive. It was kind of hurting our profit. And besides, we're both thinking we're not getting laid enough, which we probably weren't. But Jerome got the great idea that we would have male dancers and bring in lots of women to watch the show. And so I went next door and I cleaned the place all up and got everything nice, and I got a stage built and a little light show put up. And in the meantime, Jerome got out and scouted down a bunch of male dancers. And we're going to have opening night. We're going to start out running it 3 nights a week. We're going to run Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday night until we had a chance to build up a crowd and stuff. Because if you're not busy, it costs too much to keep your door open. So we thought 3 nights a week, that way we won't burn any people out. And so the first night, Jerome and I both put on our suits, and I put on my big amethyst ring and necklace, and Jerome did the same thing, and we were all decked out like a couple of sheep pimps. And we're standing in the front door with a great opening. We throw the front door open, wait, with all the girls are going to come wandering in, and they're going to be real impressed with our club and what entrepreneurs they are, and they're going to all take us out and fuck us to death. And so Jerome threw the door open, and 130 squares came through. And we ended up with the biggest square bar in Wichita. But we only ran it, in our own defense, we only ran it 2 days. After the second night, I told Jerome, I said, I just really don't want to be known as the guy that runs the biggest square bar in Wichita. You got my half of it, Jerome. And he said, you can have my half. He says, I can't be known that way either. And so we closed that deal back down. They charged us $2,400 for a license. And I think we managed to take into the cash register, not paying for anything, but just take in cash, about $2,500. So we just almost paid for the license and lost whatever money we spent in beer and remodeling and everything else. But at least we weren't the 2 guys that owned the biggest square joint in town. maybe.
Yeah.
We'll wait till Andy gets out here so he can start feeding me. Let's see, what he was asking about the dancing joint.
Fancy pants.
Fancy fannies, not
Fancy
pants.
panties? Or the stinky panties?
Stinky panties is probably what it should have been. But or maybe stinky fannies even. But it was fancy panties.
How long did you own the place?
Oh, Fancy Fannies actually had a pretty good run. We were probably in there about 4 years, and then we opened the second place, Fancy Fannies 2, and I didn't own. I owned a fourth of Fancy Fannies, but when we opened Fancy Fannies 2, I ended up with half of it. And that was where we opened the bar next door, the male dancing bar, so we could have all the women in Hutchinson love us, or in Wichita love us. Didn't work out.
Can I get one of them from you?
Yes, you may. Get a hold of one.
How's that new OXO?
Oh, just, nice, clean, looks good. But their stores do look pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm wondering really what they did in there that, unless that one had gotten real run down, because the one down the street here is just real nice.
It wasn't that bad. I don't know. It's just they spent 2 months on a remodel, and it was just.
God, yeah. I didn't think they were ever going to open it up. I've been sitting here for a week, and it looked like it was ready to open every day.
Did you ever remodel Fancy Panties?
Oh, yeah. Jerome and I agreed early on that a person needs to remodel or do some kind of major overhaul or something about every 2 years to give people the feeling that it's a different place.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they get sedimentary pretty quick.
Right.
Oh, that's the same old thing. Let's go over here. So about every 2 years, we jump in and do some big project, recarpet and repaint, build a new stage and a new bar, whatever, just anything we could think of to try to make things better. And so anyway, we were in Fancy Fannies for about, God damn, that thing was big. We were in Fancy Fannies for, I suppose, Fancy Fannies one, probably, it probably ran from about 78 till about 82. Or no, it probably ran from about 79 till about 83. Or maybe even 84. And then we got out of that business, or I got out of that business. Jerome we sold Fancy Fannies 1 to his brother-in-law, Kenneth Hadley. And Fancy Fannies 2, we had some lease problems and things with. And so we just dumped it. And we were out of the business. I was out of the business then till 86, middle of 86, early 86. I was just come home from work, and Jerome drove up the driveway and jumped out and said, "Hey, JD, I just signed a lease on the old Outer Limits building." He said, "Go out there and clean the son of a bitch up, and we'll go partners on it." And I said, "Oh, that sounds good. Judy will be thrilled to find out I'm going to be making some money again." And I went in and I told my wife that Jerome and I were going to open a new bar out in the old Outer Limits building. And she said, "If you do, I'll divorce you." And I said, "Oh, Judy, you always say that." And it turns out she told the truth. And she dumped my ass like a hot fucking potato.
What's about the craziest thing you ever seen happen in there?
Oh, God. We had all sorts of weird things happen. It seemed like there was something different every night. The girls would fight, They were actually tougher and more dangerous than the guys that came in for the most part. The outer limits had been an old bucket of blood joint out in the country that everybody come to fight and die, and so it'd been closed for a little while. But when it reopened, we got the same old crowd that was used to. We just cleaned it all up and made it beautiful, and the same piece of shit people that had been coming there for years started coming back in, and that was the last thing we wanted. And I couldn't seem to hire a bouncer that would work out. Immediately I hired the bouncer. He tried to beat up the weakest guy in the place to prove how tough he was. And the weakest guy in the place was usually a businessman with a pocket full of money, spending it on the girls and making me rich. And so they immediately run off all my good crowd. And so I finally ended up just firing bouncers completely and using myself and occasionally a friend or two to try to keep order in that house. One thing that happened one night was it was raining out, and our entryway, hallway that came in and brought you into the building, the floor got wet in it and slipped. You know, tile floor, how slick one of those little VA tile floors will get when it gets a little water on it. And it was getting down toward the end of the evening, and I was standing at the end of the bar, just leaning on it, waiting for the night to end so I could go home. And one of the girls was bent over trying to get a tip at a table right by the door where you go out, and where this hallway door. And this guy walked by and bent over and bit her on the ass like a fucking dog. And he bit her pretty good. He left cheese marks and shit. And another dancer happened to see it, and I was about half asleep and I damn near missed the whole thing. But the other girl run right into the hallway and jumped onto this guy. He bit her and stepped right into the hallway and thought he was home free, going to walk out of there and nothing going to be done about it. But this other dancer jumped right in the hallway and jumped on him, and she and he went fighting, and then the other girl run around there and jumped into it, and the two girls went to beating this motherfucker half silly, and I of course had to bring peace upon the situation, so I ran in there and hit that slick fucking floor and slipped and went down on my ass and on my back and slid in underneath these three, who proceeded to stomp the living fuck out of me, especially the two girls in the high heels. I come out of that looking like I wasn't going to live. A high heel will knock a hole in you that ain't funny.
I bet.
It's like a bullet, almost like a bullet wound without a bullet. And boy, and that was, as a matter of fact, that was the worst I ever got hurt in that place. Was that night? Them girls, the three of them, and me in there, and nobody else seemed to be able to get in to break it up. The doorman and the bartender and the other people that should have, we just seemed to be too crowded in there, and I couldn't get out from under them, and they wouldn't get off the top of me, and I was hollering and screaming and crying, and they were hollering and screaming and crying, and it just was altogether not too good a fucking experience.
So what about Alice?
Oh, back in the mid-70s, Gary Blevins, Kenny Stevens, and I went to California to see Tom Feaster and attend his sister's wedding. Or it was actually in Newport, Oregon. And we got out there, and one thing led to another, and but we did manage to get the poor girl married, and then we managed to carry fishing boat up, and so we come back to Newport to re-energize and to get our directions straight. First night back in Newport, Tom had to drag out film footage. He was telling us about this gal that he'd been married to that he'd just divorced. Her name was Alice, but sometimes they refer to her as Alice. And well, he got the pictures out, or got his video deal out, and he'd made a video of himself and another guy taking turns butt fucking Alice, and he put that on, and then he had a tape of him, an audio tape of him having sex with Alice, and he put that on and let us listen to it for about 10 hours, it seemed like.
This is a big girl, huh?
Yeah, she was a fairly healthy young lady. Tom's a big guy. He's as big as Tim in there, or even bigger. And so anyway, during the night, Tom, we got a pretty good idea of what Alice was like. And the next day, we went to the grocery store to get some food, and I was just wandering around in the store, and I happened to walk into an aisle, and I stepped into the aisle and started down the aisle behind this lady, and the lady ahead of me was pretty wide enough that she could pretty well take the groceries off both sides of the shelf without swinging her hips. And I was walking behind her and kind of giggling to myself. I thought, wouldn't it be funny if this was Alice? And about that time, Tom stepped around into the aisle from the other end and screamed, "Alice!" And she screamed, "Tom!" And they took off running toward each other. And I swear to God, this woman just cleaned one whole row of grocery store shelves, clear of everything, with her big ass going through there. And I got so tickled, I just laid down in the fucking aisle and went to crying and laughing.
Wonderful girl, huh?
Lovely, lovely. And what a personality.
Well, thank you for that.
Personality just to match that ass.
Thank you for that wonderful story. I hope
You're more than welcome.
Now, who is this?
His name was Frank Hammer, and he was a Texas Ranger, and he was the one they sent to clean up Border, Texas. And when he got off the train, and they said, just one Ranger, he said, just one town. Anyway, Dad said Frank came down from the whorehouse and said, well, D, I think I got it all in hand. Said he hadn't done one damn thing except write a traffic ticket and fuck every whore in the whorehouse till she was bow-legged sore. She couldn't make a living anymore, and drank every drop of whiskey he could lay hands on. And so he figured that cleaned the town up pretty well. All the whores were pretty well out of business for too much exercise, and all the booze was gone. So he got on the train and left. And Dad said a few days later, somebody come in with a paper from Dallas, and the headline in the Dallas paper said, "Frank Hammer cleans up Borger, Texas." So Dad said Dad had to go to Amarillo once a week to where there was a bank, so he could get deposit money and get cash, or deposit checks and pay checks and stuff and get cash and bring it back. And he hired a couple of cops. But quick story on Borger. When Dad was in Borger, in town, Dad had the biggest business there in Borger with his mercantile company, and so he cashed most of the checks for the oil field workers working out there around Borger, and there were like several thousand of these guys had come in there by then. There were 3,000 or 4,000 oil field workers, and he was taking in huge amounts of checks and having them turn them into money. And so once a week he would load up all the checks and get in his Model T, and he would drive 70 miles, not on a road, but across the prairie. He had to drive across the prairie on just like a wagon track, and then cross the Canadian River, no bridge. Had to go down and drive through the river and up the other side and drive into Amarillo, Texas, cash all these checks and turn it into money so he could bring it back same way, driving across the prairie and down the hill and back up.
Right.
And on into Borger. One day he said he was in the store, and he said a man walked up to the counter. He said he had seen and met the man a time or two before. Didn't really know him hardly, but the guy was kind of a little bit of a customer. And the guy walked up to him and said, D, they're going to rob you. And that's what? And he said, the guy just turned around and walked away from him. That's all he said. And walked away. And Dad thought, what the fuck is he talking about? They're going to rob my store or whatever. The next week, he went to Amarillo and said when he left Amarillo and came out of Amarillo heading back north toward Borger, he said he came out and he said he looked behind him and there was a car behind him. And he said out there that was pretty unusual. There just weren't very many cars and no traffic and no road, and so he said he was a little curious. He said he sped up. He said the car behind him sped up. He said he slowed down, and he said the car behind him slowed down. And he said he did that back and forth several times to make sure the guy was just whoever was in the car was following him. And he said they stayed far enough back from him that he couldn't really see who was in the car or how many. But he said so. He just said he tried to remain calm and said when he got up close to where the Canadian River was, he said he slowed down to try to slow them down a little bit, and he said then he floored it and just took off for the river fast as he could run. And he said he had to go over a hill and then drop down into the river bed. And he said when he made that hill and dropped down into the river bed, he just turned right and went upstream in the river. And he said he drove upstream 150 or so yards, found a place that was real brushy and what have you, turned the car up into it and drove into the brush, got out, piled what tumbleweeds and a little bit of loose stuff he could get up and against the car to try to disguise it, and grabbed his money in a bag and run up and hid under an overhang that the river had cut there in the bank. And he said, sure as shit, he had been hidden up there more than 3 or 4 minutes, and he said that car come down the river right behind where he'd been. And they drove by him. They didn't see his car. They didn't see him. He said they drove on down the river out of sight, and they were gone a little while. But then here that car come back up the river real slow again looking, and they missed his car again, and they missed him, and they drove on up the river the other way, and they were gone a while. And then they come back by again, and then back, and he said the car disappeared then, and he said he laid there till night, and finally when it was good and dark, he got up, got his Model T started, back out of the brush, back down into the river, and drove back down to where you crossed at, and up the bank, and took off for Borger, and he made Borger all right. But he said after that, from then on, when he went to make his money run into Amarillo every week, he put 2 guys in the back seat with shotguns.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, and never had another attempt at robbing him.
Well, that's good he didn't get robbed, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Damn good, because they probably wouldn't have left any witness in a place like that. And those times it'd been real easy, a lot easier just to kill a man and not have anybody to tell a story. Did I tell you about Ben Glenn Fonda pissing on a guy?
I don't think so. What happened?
I had these 2 buddies, Arnie Rupke and Glenn Fonda. And Arnie...
Fonda?
Fonda, F-O-N-D-A-W.
Yeah.
French name. And Glenn was the one that went to prison for robbing the Neiman Marcus store.
Oh, yeah.
And he did 3 years in Huntsville. And when he got out, I hadn't seen Glenn for 3 years. I knew he was getting out and coming home pretty quick, but we didn't know just exactly what day or whatever. I was sitting in the Manhattan Club there in Hutchinson, drinking a beer at the bar about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and all of a sudden there were 2 hands on my shoulder and a face come up against me and kind of give me about a half-wet kiss on the cheek, and I didn't even have to look around, and I knew it was Glenn. And I reached around and got a hold of him, and he sat down, and I said, give this man a beer for God's sake, and what have you. And he sat there, and we talked for about, not any time at all, just a few seconds. And Glenn said, hey, JD, just a minute. And I said, what? He said, just a minute, just sit there a minute. I said, okay. So he got up and walked over to this fellow that had a pair of bib overalls on, old country-looking boy. And he just run over and got right in his face, man, and started yelling at him and talking bad to him and telling this guy, he keep telling him, said, look me in the fucking eye, you son of a bitch. Look me in, don't look away from me, look me in the eye. And every time he's telling this guy, look me in the eye, he's unzipping his pants and getting his dick out. And all of a sudden, he's just pissed all over this guy. So, the guy was so fucking scared, he just didn't even say anything to Glenn. He just walked out with piss all over his pants. And Glenn sat down beside me, and we had a few beers. And one thing went on, and another, and the band come on and started playing. And about 10 o'clock, the band took a break, got down, and somebody turned the jukebox on. And for whatever reason, the music come on. Glenn walked over, hauled his dick out, put his knees up on the jukebox where he could get up at the right level, and pissed down the corn clod. Shorted the jukebox out, and the motherfucker caught fire. That's probably 300 people in the fucking place. They had to throw us all out in the street, call the fire department. Hell of a night.
So my buddy D Cox here with the hand at Tennessee Cove, as you like to call it. He said earlier when we started this documentary, he said, you know what, Andrew, we should, would you say we should consecrate or desecrate or do something with this place to make...
we can name this Tennessee Cove, if whatever this name is, they got this makes no sense.
And then I showed him that little plaque there that was my father's. I go, well, it kind of already has been A. Tennessee to Chief Senior, my father, but at the end of the day here, it's been a couple days, well actually a week, but a couple days of doing documentary with an unbelievable person here, my friend DJ, JD, whatever.
I appreciate the word.
And we had a great time, so we planted a tree on the hand to commemorate JD being here.
Cox's bush.
And there it is.